The year was 1963. Britain was still recovering from the aftermath of World War II, rebuilding itself brick by brick, when a crime occurred that would shake the nation to its core. They called it the Great Train Robbery. 15 men stopped a Royal Mail train in the dead of night and made off with what would be worth over £50 million today. But here's what most people don't know. The robbery wouldn't have been possible without help from the inside. Without a man who wore the uniform, who carried the badge of trust, who knew every detail of that train's operation. This is the story of the train guard who helped robbers escape. Welcome to Twisted Tales TV. Let's go back to the early 1960s. Post-war Britain was a place of contrasts. While the country was modernizing, many working-class people still struggled to make ends meet. The railways were the lifeblood of the nation, carrying everything from passengers to mail to money. Lots of money. The Royal Mail trains ran like clockwork through the British countryside every night. These weren't ordinary trains. They carried registered mail, which included cash being transported between banks, pension payments, payrolls from major companies. On any given night, a mail train might be carrying hundreds of thousands of packages. But one train in particular caught the attention of a group of criminals in London. The Glasgow to London Mail train. This train ran every night except Sunday. It departed Glasgow at 6:50 p.m. and arrived at London Euston around 4 a.m. What made it special was one particular carriage, the high-value package coach. This coach was loaded with more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. The criminal gang watching this train wasn't made up of amateurs. These were professional thieves who had been planning robberies for years. Men like Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind, Charlie Wilson, the muscle, Gordon Goody, the enforcer, Buster Edwards, the charmer, and Ronnie Biggs, who would later become the most famous of them all, though not for the reasons he might have hoped. But they had a problem. They could stop a train. They could overpower the guards. But they needed specific information. They needed to know exactly when the train carried the most money.
Gentlemen, the moment is now. We
They
move
needed
with
to know the
precision, no
layout
dilly
of the
patterns.
high-value
Is that clear?
package coach.
Yes, sir.
They
Understood.
needed to know the security procedures, the number of staff, the vulnerabilities. They needed someone on the inside. Enter our main character. History knows him only as the Ulsterman. His real identity was never officially confirmed, though investigators had their suspicions. Some said he was a postal worker. Others claimed he was a railway employee. A few believed he was a guard on the very trains they planned to rob. What we do know is this. The Ulsterman had detailed knowledge of the mail train operations. He knew the schedules. He knew the security protocols. Most importantly, he knew when the train would be carrying its biggest haul of cash. The gang approached him sometime in early 1963. How they found him remains a mystery. Perhaps he had gambling debts. Perhaps he was simply greedy. Perhaps he felt underpaid and undervalued by the railway company. Whatever his motivation, he agreed to help. His role was simple but crucial. He provided the gang with information. He told them that in early August, the train would be carrying an enormous sum, far more than usual. He explained the layout of the high-value package coach. He described how the staff would react in an emergency. He might have even told them the best location to stop the train, a place remote enough that help wouldn't arrive quickly. Some historians believe he did more than just provide information. Some think he was actually on the train that night, ready to help from the inside. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. With the Ulsterman's information, the gang refined their plan. They would stop the train at a place called Bridego Bridge, near a small Buckinghamshire village called Ledburn. It was perfect, remote, dark, with good road access for their getaway vehicles. But how do you stop a train? The gang came up with an audacious solution. They would tamper with the railway signals. They would cover the green light with a glove and attach a battery to the red light to make sure it stayed on. When the train driver saw the red signal, he would stop. That's when the robbery would begin. They purchased a farm called Leatherslade Farm, about 27 miles from the robbery site. This would be their hideout, where they divide the money and lay low until the heat died down. The gang rehearsed meticulously. They practiced stopping a train on a different stretch of track. They timed everything down to the minute. They acquired the vehicles they would need, including 2 Land Rovers and several trucks to carry the money. As August approached, the tension mounted. The Ulsterman had given them the date. August 8, 1963. That train, he told them, would be carrying around 2.5 million pounds, worth approximately $50 million today. August 7th rolled into August 8th. Just after midnight, the train departed Glasgow, right on schedule. In a high-value package coach, 75 railway staff sorted through bags of registered mail. Among those bags were 128 sacks containing banknotes, more money than any of them had ever seen in one place. The gang was already in position near Bridego Bridge. 15 men dressed in dark clothing, their faces covered. They'd tampered with the signals earlier that evening. Now they waited in the darkness, listening for the sound of the approaching train. At approximately 3 a.m., the train appeared. The driver, Jack Mills, saw the red signal and began to slow down. This was unusual. This signal was almost never read at this time of night. But railway procedure was clear. Red means stop. Always. The train came to a halt right where the gang wanted it. Jack Mills sent his co-driver, David Whitby, to use the trackside telephone to find out why the signal was red. That's when the robbery began. As Whitby approached the telephone, he was grabbed by members of the gang. They told him to keep quiet and he wouldn't be hurt. Meanwhile, other gang members swarmed onto the train. They overwhelmed Jack Mills in the driver's cab. During the struggle, Mills was hit over the head with a metal bar. He would never fully recover from his injuries and died 7 years later, his family always believing the robbery had killed him. This is where things get interesting regarding the Ulsterman. The gang needed to move the train forward to the bridge where their trucks were waiting. They brought their own train driver for this purpose. But here's the problem.
Sir, you must get off
their
now.
driver couldn't
but my
operate
luggage is still
this particular
inside.
type of
No
train.
time. Go now.
The equipment
All
was
aboard.
different from what
Departing
he
now.
was used
Stand
to.
clear of the
Some
doors.
investigators believe this is when the Ulsterman revealed himself. Someone with detailed knowledge of the train helped move it forward to the right position. Was it one of the injured crew, forced to help under threat? Or was it someone already on the train, someone who had been waiting for this moment? We may never know for certain, but the train was moved. And what happened next was organized chaos. The gang formed a human chain from the high-value package coach to their trucks. They threw bag after bag of money, working with military precision. They had planned to take just the registered mail bags, but in their excitement and haste, they grabbed everything they could. The postal workers in the coach were ordered to lie on the floor. Don't move, don't look up, and you won't get hurt. Most complied. They were railway workers, not security guards. They weren't paid to be heroes. The robbery lasted about 20 minutes. When it was over, the gang had loaded approximately 120 bags into their vehicles. They had no idea exactly how much money they'd taken. They would only find out later, when they reached Leatherslade Farm and began counting. They left the train crew shaken, but mostly unharmed, except for poor Jack Mills with his head injury. Then they vanished into the night, taking back roads to avoid attention. The train crew managed to contact authorities around 4:20 a.m. The response was immediate and massive. This wasn't just a robbery. This was an assault on British institutions. The Royal Mail, the railways, the very idea of security and order. The investigation, codenamed Operation Primrose, became one of the largest manhunts in British history. Detective Superintendent Malcolm Futrell led the Buckinghamshire investigation, while Detective Chief Superintendent Tommy Butler of Scotland Yard took charge of tracking down the robbers. Back at Leatherslade Farm, the gang counted their haul. 2.6 million pounds. Far more than even they had expected. The Ulsterman's information had been accurate. This was the biggest train robbery in British history. But their celebration was short-lived. The gang had made mistakes. They left fingerprints at the farm. They abandoned vehicles with traceable parts.
Hurry!
Worst
Get
of
it all
all,
out!
they stayed
Watch
at
the loose
Leatherslade
bills!
Farm too long,
That's the last
too
of it!
comfortable, playing Monopoly with real money while the police net closed around them. While police hunted the robbers themselves, they also searched for the insider. They knew there had to be one. The robbery was too well-informed, too precise. Someone had provided detailed intelligence. Investigators interviewed hundreds of railway and postal workers. They looked for anyone with financial problems, anyone with criminal connections, anyone who had been asking unusual questions about train operations. Several men came under suspicion. One postal worker had recently purchased an expensive car. Another had unexplained absences from work around the time of the robbery. A railway guard had been seen talking with known criminals, but they could never prove anything. The Ulsterman, whoever he was, had covered his tracks well. Or perhaps the gang had protected him, knowing that revealing his identity would only create more evidence against themselves. Some investigators became convinced they knew who he was.
All right, let's move these.
They believed he was a man from Northern
Steady
Ireland
on the base,
who had worked
to
for
the right door.
railways and
The
had
mission is
connections
critical.
to the postal
You have your
service.
orders. Yes,
Hence
sir.
the nickname,
Understood,
the
sir.
Ulsterman. But without hard evidence, they couldn't make an arrest. The gang members themselves weren't as fortunate. One by one, they were caught. The police found Leatherslade Farm on August 13th, just 5 days after the robbery. The fingerprint evidence was overwhelming. By August 23rd, the first arrests were made. Charlie Wilson was picked up, then Gordon Goody, then more. Bruce Reynolds managed to evade capture for 5 years, living in Mexico, Canada, and France before finally being arrested in 1968. Ronnie Biggs became perhaps the most famous. He was caught and sentenced, but escaped from Wandsworth Prison in 1965 and fled to Brazil, where he lived as a celebrity fugitive for decades before returning to Britain in 2001. The trials were sensational. Britain was captivated. These weren't sophisticated international criminals. They were working-class men from London who had pulled off something audacious. Some people, particularly in working-class communities, saw them as folk heroes, modern-day Robin Hoods, even though they hadn't stolen from the rich to give to the poor. They'd simply stolen. The sentences were severe. 30 years for most of them. The judge wanted to send a message. But notably absent from the dock was the Ulsterman. The insider who made it all possible remained free. Over the years, various people claimed to know the Ulsterman's identity. Some said it was a man named Patrick McKenna. Others pointed to different suspects. In 2014, a documentary claimed to have identified him definitively, but the evidence remained circumstantial. What we know for certain is that someone with inside knowledge helped plan this robbery. The gang couldn't have chosen that specific date, that specific train, that specific location without information that only an insider could provide. The question that haunts this case is, why was he never caught? Several theories exist. Perhaps he was caught, but never prosecuted. Perhaps investigators made a deal with him for information about the others. Perhaps he was more careful than his accomplices and left no evidence.
I see it. We need to move.
Perhaps he was never actually on the train that night, and his only crime was providing information, which would be harder to prove. Or perhaps, as some believe, he was protected. Some have suggested he had connections to intelligence services. Others think he had information that could implicate even bigger players, people the authorities didn't want exposed. While the public was fascinated by the daring heist and the cat-and-mouse game between police and robbers, it's easy to forget the human cost. Jack Mills, the train driver, never recovered from his injuries. The blow to his head left him unable to work. He struggled with anxiety and headaches for the rest of his life. He died in 1970, and his family always maintained that the robbery killed him, even if it took 7 years. The postal workers on the train were traumatized. Several never returned to railway work. They'd been going about their ordinary jobs when suddenly they were thrown to the floor by masked men. That kind of experience leaves scars. The gang members who were caught paid heavily too. 30 years in prison is a long time. Some died in prison. Others were released as broken men. Charlie Wilson was released in 1978, but was murdered in Spain in 1990. Buster Edwards eventually hanged himself. The money brought them nothing but misery. And the money itself? Most of it was never recovered. Only about £400,000 was ever found. The rest vanished, presumably hidden or spent. Some believe it's still buried somewhere, waiting to be discovered. Others think it was laundered away long ago. What happened to the Ulsterman? Did he get his share of the money? Did he live a comfortable life while his accomplices rotted in prison? Or did the gang betray him, keeping his share for themselves? We don't know. There are stories. Some say he emigrated, using his share to start a new life abroad. Others claim he never got the money, that the gang cut him out once the robbery was complete. A few believe he was murdered to keep him quiet, his body never found. In 2013, on the 50th anniversary of the robbery, Bruce Reynolds' son Nick made a statement. He said his father had told him the Ulsterman
count
was
is
long
confirmed.
dead,
Good,
having
loaded
died
securely.
of natural causes
Sir, the transport
years
is
earlier.
waiting. Proceed.
But he wouldn't
This
reveal
matches
the
the
name,
manifest.
claiming he'd
Good.
promised his
Proceed with the
father
next bundle.
to keep the
Counting
secret.
now, sir.
If that's true, then the Ulsterman took his secret to the grave. He committed one of the most significant criminal acts in British history and got away with it completely. No arrest, no trial, no prison sentence. He simply disappeared into obscurity. The Great Train Robbery captured the British imagination like few crimes before or since. Books have been written, movies have been made, songs have been sung. It represents a particular moment in British cultural history when class tensions were high, when traditional deference to authority was breaking down, when working-class criminals could become folk heroes. But at the heart of this story is a darker truth. The Ulsterman, whoever he was, betrayed a trust. He wore a uniform or held a position that gave him access to sensitive information. People relied on him to keep the railways safe, and he used that trust to facilitate a violent robbery that hurt innocent people. His motivations remain mysterious. Was it purely greed? Did he feel wronged by his employers? Did he have
on the
debts
Ulsterman's
that drove
role in
him
the
to
Great Train
desperation?
Robbery,
We'll
with his
probably never
identity
know.
still a
What
mystery.
we do know is that his information made the robbery possible. Without him, the gang might have tried something else, somewhere else, against different targets. Jack Mills might have lived a longer, happier life. The postal workers might not carry the trauma of that night. The Ulsterman got away with it. That's a fact. Whether he lived happily with his ill-gotten gains or spent his life looking over his shoulder, we can't say. Whether he felt remorse or pride, we don't know. Every heist movie makes robbery look glamorous. The clever criminals outsmarting the system, getting rich, riding off into the sunset. The Great Train Robbery seemed like that for a while. Daring men pulling off an audacious crime, stealing millions, becoming legends. But the reality was uglier. A man was beaten and never recovered. Lives were destroyed. Most of the robbers ended up dead or broken. And somewhere in the shadows, an insider who made it all possible disappeared without a trace. The files remain partially sealed. Some information about the investigation won't be released until 2045. Perhaps then we'll finally learn the Ulsterman's identity. Perhaps we'll understand why he did it and what happened to him afterward. Until then, he remains what he's always been. A ghost, a whisper, a name without a face. The train guard who helped robbers escape and escaped justice himself. This has been Twisted Tales TV. Some stories have clear endings. This one doesn't. And perhaps that's the most twisted part of all.